On a week that the political lines have been clearly drawn, a new fad has hit the campaign trail. This time, it's all about the money for the children and whose promise holds more water.
Kutoka mwaka ujao, watoto wote ambao wataingia shule za upili kutoka form 1 mpaka form 4, mzazi hataitishwa pesa, itakuwa vile tu kama ya free primary.
Sisi tumesema tukishika namna hii kuanzia Septemba watoto watasoma bure katika shule zote za sekondari, sio Januari, Septemba mwaka huu.
But the renewed promises of free secondary education has sparked mixed reactions across the sector. While some stakeholders are excited that education is now featuring prominently on the campaign, others are skeptical that the political camps are simply flexing muscles over their education agenda. Tonight, the teachers, the parents, the unionists and other education stakeholders have their say. Has the Kenyan child's right to free basic education become a simple campaign gimmick? That's up next on the Roundtable with Asha Mwelu.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Roundtable. We are at Radisson Blue Hotel here in Nairobi, and we have Mr. Nicholas Mayo, who's the chair of the National Association of Parents. We have Amos Kaburu, welcome, from Uwezo. We have Janet Modhoni, not a new face to KTN News, who's an education analyst. You have many different hats, but today you're an education analyst. Sure. And of course, Mr. Omboko Milemba, the chair of KUPPET, the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers. Karibuni. You've heard what President Uhuru Kenyatta and the NASA candidate Raila Odinga have said about the free secondary education. What comes to mind?
I think let me begin. It is the time for free secondary education to be implemented. What are they really saying? I think the Jubilee leadership is saying we were not able to actualize the Constitution as it prefers education, because if you go to the Constitution, it says every Kenyan child should have a right to free and compulsory. In fact, there's the word compulsory, basic education. And then quickly we define what is basic education. So you're
saying that by President Uhuru saying that the free secondary education will kick off next year in January, it's an admission.
It's an admission, because he should have implemented it, because that's what the Constitution says. And what NASA could be saying then is that we are going to implement the Constitution to the letter insofar as education, basic education is concerned. So for me, they are all struggling to simply tell us that education needs to be implemented to the letter.
The good thing about this is that all these gentlemen have been around here. We've shared platforms. And frantically, we have seen various attempts by the Ministry of Education to implement free secondary education. I can attest to that. And one of the things that we must admit here now is that about secondary education, it's not a matter of saying, let there be, and there is. What I think must happen is that the current regime, even if NASA comes in, they will benefit so much from the structures that the current Jubilee administration has put in place.
What are those structures? When you say that the ministry has attempted to bring in free secondary education and they haven't, then what makes September, for instance, feasible, or what makes next January possible?
One of the things,
and actually, what we have to be very cautious is to look at the details, because if you listen to the president making reference to free primary education, it raises the question of what is free, because the devil lies in the details. And one of the things that we cannot sit here, afford to listen to politicians tell us time and again, is that they can manage to make education free. It's not possible. It has never worked anywhere, because you cannot have free education. You can manage to provide free schooling to a certain extent, because nobody is capable of computing the actual cost of education, including the opportunity cost. If I choose to send my children to school, I'm sending them there at a certain cost. Who bears the responsibility, for instance, things such as uniform, things such as health. And we've seen that even with the free primary education, these are direct costs that households are bearing.
What you've mentioned, there's actually someone who is directly concerned. You're a parent,
Yes.
and this is a promise directly to you,
Exactly.
Mr. Mayo. So what are the parents thinking about this?
Exactly after the announcement of Uhuru and Raila about the free secondary education, the parents actually were happy across the country. All of them were very happy. But according to me, as a parent, is that maybe the key components of education, like the learning materials, textbooks, exercise books, will be free,
Yes.
but not uniform and food.
Okay.
Let me tell you why. Sitting where I am sitting, I cannot believe the opposition. I cannot believe the opposition even a bit. Let me tell you why. It is not. It is not a matter. It's not just a matter of saying. One of the things that Kenyans are not very good at is at holding people accountable. We've had a parliament sitting pretty, seeing how the Ministry of Education has struggled with ensuring that a few things attempt to move at the Ministry of Education. Let me ask them, what did they do?
Guidelines.
One of the people today that I want to talk to is, for example, somebody like TJ Kajwang, who is in the opposition and who is a member of the Committee of Delegated Legislation. That committee that is supposed to make sure that we have even regulations, the Basic Education Act, that could have enabled the current government ensure that secondary school
and
is
I
free
understand
as
your
we
point,
speak.
but listen, because this has taken actually a political turn, and the question on many Kenyans' minds is this going to be another empty promise, another campaign?
For
gimmick?
example,
For example, Mr. Milemba, let's give Mr. Milemba. Let's give Mr. Milemba.
From both sides.
I began by saying one party admitted had not implemented the Constitution, and I referred to it. Another one is saying wants to implement it fully. Now, when it comes to the issue of the timelines, maybe what the NASA team is saying is that for us, we shall give it priority and implement it immediately. And you know, that's also possible if you want, so long as you have the willpower, you know where you want to get the money from. You should be able to implement this because free compulsory education should have been benefiting all the Kenyan students.
Mr. Milemba, let me just ask you this. Both candidates are promising free secondary education.
Yes. So
September
the person
and January is just a matter of
wants
months.
to bring it in January also is correct, but he's simply saying, I'm not giving it the quick priority and therefore I'll plan.
That is not correct.
Shall I ask one question, please,
Yes,
kindly?
yes, madam.
Please.
Especially to Janet and Mr. Milemba. How objective can you be about the education sector? You have been stakeholders in this sector for years. Everyone knows you. But how objective can you be on this issue when it's a political one and both of you, everyone knows, you've thrown your hat in the ring, in the political ring. Exactly. So you're in the NASA camp.
Let me give you my journey.
How can you
to
be
move
objective?
a motion in Parliament if I'm elected on November 8th to have free second school education. I'm just happy the two camps have taken it on.
Let me tell you my journey. Let me tell you my journey. I have fought. It is in public domain. It is recorded. I have fought the cost of secondary education in this country, but I have not seen the commitment of Parliament. I have not seen the commitment of Parliament. This thing is far beyond standing here and making a declaration. That is what I want the opposition to understand. And I want to ask, where was that opposition when Alliance was costing 120,000 Kenya shillings? If they are really that committed to public good, they should have mobilized their troops in that parliament to ensure that the public good was met. But where were they? They were not available. Where are you going to come from, for example? As we speak today, the cost of uniform is about 27,000. And we know the attempts the Ministry of Education has done to try and bring that cost down. Every Kenyan can attest to that there has been a lot of attempts for this to be done. What we want to agree here is that there has not been cooperation from all the arms of government. Parliament, for example, and this is what we are telling the citizens. It is not just about the executive. It is about you going down there and electing a leader who will think this way and who will think that education is your priority. But as long as even those leaders believe that education is their priority, and we have members of Parliament that don't think that way, it's not going to be possible.
I think, Asha, we seem to be throwing the cat before the horse. There are critical sector issues that need to be handled. But I think what the political class has done is to manage to bring an issue that elicits a lot of emotions, an issue that can form good fodder for campaigns, and is therefore going to derail us from discussing very critical issues, including the ongoing reforms in the sector. We have to understand that the issue of cost of secondary education is a sub-issue, according to me. Because if you have to look at a system holistically, then we have to look at 6 critical aspects. We have to look at the question of access, we have to look at the question of equity, the question of relevance, the question of standards, and financing becomes the last component. So we have to understand the spirit behind pronouncements and policy formulations around issues of free provision of services. Yes. And this comes from an equity approach. So the question is, who are we targeting when we talk about free secondary education?
And that's a good question, yes. Because for many people, when you hear free secondary education, the first thing that comes to mind is free primary education.
Exactly.
And the question is it a race to sort of like create this legacy around education, as we know President Kibaki did? And just hold that thought. I want you to watch that story about the legacy of the free primary education, because it raises some questions about what we're proposing now with free secondary education.
Mimi Mwai Kibaki naapa kwamba.
It is the legacy that all top politicians are chasing, that of Kenya's third president, Mwai Kibaki.
Kwa moyo wangu wote.
By his first term in office, President Kibaki had rolled out one of his biggest campaign promises, the free primary education. But the project was not short of its fair share of controversy. State House plunged quickly into the public's critical eye as officials at the Education Ministry were accused of sabotaging the project.
PS and the minister are the people to give a political direction. They are the ones who are supposed to give direction. And for sure, if the British government can come clear and point a finger to them, because you cannot accuse anybody else. This is the person who is accounting. The PS is the accounting person, the minister is the political leader of that ministry. What we are saying is that we need a complete overhaul, and especially on the top leadership of the ministry.
But even though the free primary education took off and was sustained throughout Kibaki's 2 terms, concerns over the dwindling quality of education crept into Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency. Uhuru had inherited the ghosts of the free primary education.
Parents Association says it is ready to sue the Ministry of Education and the Teachers Service Commission of what it terms as illegal fees charged by public schools.
14 years after its introduction, the management of the Free Primary Education Fund is still in question, with the current Education Cabinet Secretary having to put the sector on notice just 1 month ago.
There's one thing that I think as a public servant I have to say very openly and very candidly. We have no shortage of resources in our country. We're the 7th largest funder of education in the globe. Since free primary education started and free day secondary education, we have pumped over 300 billion shillings into the education sector. And we continue to put money in the education sector every day. The shortage we have in our sector is a shortage of honesty and integrity. That is the problem.
With questions still lingering on the free primary education, the new promises of free secondary education within the next few months is now an eyebrow-raising issue.
And I think I want to pick it from there. I heard somebody say that it's impractical to provide for a free secondary school education in Kenya. I think that's not correct. It is just the commitment. Now let's look around ourselves. You know, Uganda here dared and is actually providing free secondary school education. Try Namibia. You know, those are economies that are not very strong, but they have made a step moving forward to provide free secondary school education. So tell me about challenges that we are likely to face and which as a teacher union we shall actually give you. But as a matter of commitment, free second school education should have been with us by now.
What
I know is that what we are going to face will be challenges to do with the quality of education.
Exactly, that was the first question.
Exactly. Yes. And allow me then to divulge into that.
Yes.
I know we shall have a challenge of influx of students into schools, and therefore we shall have a challenge of infrastructure in our schools. So both parties, whether NASA or Jubilee, must actually tell us the framework for coming up with infrastructure in schools. Immediately you announce that, there will be also influx of students in schools.
Yeah.
So tell us clearly, are you employing more teachers to take that? I have had discussions with people in studio who sometimes have calculated the ratio of teacher to student using body mass. I don't want to go into that, but we must employ more teachers.
But Mr. Milemba, those challenges are not the only ones. They are not the only ones. Let me give you one example. Look at the legacy of the free primary education.
Exactly.
Look at even when did the government revise the capitation grant? It was in 2013. 10 years after
later.
the program was
and in fact, the bigger question is, if at all free primary education was the panacea to access and equity in Kenya, why do we still have more than 1 million children out of school?
And this is why I am saying,
it means that it goes beyond capitation. Free primary education was not the panacea, and free secondary school education is not the panacea to move us from 87 to 100%.
No, Kaburu, I'm disappointed, Kaburu. I'm disappointed,
Janet,
Kaburu.
wait.
Because
wait a minute.
In the globe, around the globe, the biggest barrier to education is levies, and you know this, Kaburu.
It is true. But then that which raises the question, if you talk of free primary education, and as we speak now, parents in rural areas are paying for up to 3,000 shillings for every single child attending a primary school. How free is that free primary education? That is the question.
And this is where we
you cannot have a government alleging that it's providing free education when they are all the household expenditure on education has doubled over time. In fact, it's almost tripling. So you have to answer the critical questions. What are these cost drivers that perhaps we need to address? For instance, if the government sends 17 shillings for quality assurance, which is for examination, tell me which examination can you offer for 17 shillings for a child a year?
Let me ask you, Mr. Kaburu, from Wezo's perspective, are you saying that you think that it's not right to begin to kick off the program right now? Free secondary education? We need to know what you're standing.
What are you standing for?
The point is that we need to have policies that are very clear on what they are targeting. We stand for policies that target the poor, in a sense that if you look at the bursary system, it works very, very well. The government has to be very clear we have to be very clear what we mean by free secondary education.
Kaburu, we can't, for example, begin interrogating.
No, we have to. We have to, because it's usually the devil lies in the details. We cannot afford to listen to political pronouncements. And come next year, somebody tells us, we are giving a capitation of 20,000 shillings when we know that 20,000 shillings cannot run.
Let them commit themselves. Let them commit themselves.
So that is the question.
Let them commit themselves. By going out there and telling the populace, we shall provide free secondary education.
What does it mean?
January is not very far from us.
What does it mean
September is not very far from us.
Secondary education, because that's what
whatever it means. Whatever it means. There is a study. There is a study.
Could I please ask you a question, Janet?
Yes, please.
And I understand where Mr. Kaburu is coming from.
Yes.
When you think about free secondary education, what exactly is the government targeted to do? Does it mean that the parent is going to pay nothing?
What I am saying is that.
What does it stand for? Does it stand for?
I understood it that he doesn't
fully.
agree with the current approach. That you're just promising free secondary education. We don't know how much. I don't know if
so it's
exactly
pessimistic.
Yes, I'm very, very pessimistic about what is being proposed, because I'm not new to the policy space.
If we don't grab this money, if we don't grab this money as a sector, if we don't grab this money as a sector, it will definitely go to some other places. So I am happy, Kaburu, because we are not having this referendum now as to whether we need free secondary education or we don't. We had that referendum and we passed a constitution.
But Janet,
so education for now is supposed to be given to every child up to the age of 18. It's not a referendum we are having.
Okay, this is a quick question to you. Pre-primary education, we are still seeing schools where students are learning under trees, schools where students have no books. Actually, the time that C.S. Matiang'i made that statement, he was talking about a school he visited in Nyanza, where there was only one GHC book
social studies
in the
book.
entire class.
Yes.
So secondary school is more involving.
Yes.
There's more one-on-one interaction between the student and the pupil.
Yes.
So how then do you ensure that the
I hardly agree with Janet sometimes, but she's correct on this.
Yes.
We want a leadership that is daring.
Exactly.
Kibaki comes in and says, hey, you guys, I'm giving you free primary school education in the next 190 days? So we must appreciate that the two collisions, the one that was in and the one that is trying to come in, is daring to provide free second school education.
To implement the Constitution.
That is the beginning.
To implement the Constitution.
I agree with you on many occasions.
Have that power to dare, then we shall never have it. And therefore,
can we hear from Mr. Mayo?
I agree with you many times.
I want us to hear from Mr.
Parents are paying now more for primary education.
We can even have it in September because a matter of priority. We can do. There was even something called a supplementary budget.
But
we are paying more for primary education than we did before FPE.
Mr. Kabudi, just a minute. No, wait.
Yes.
Mr. Mayo.
Yes, madam.
I want to just quiet the noise.
Yes.
What do you think, just hearing everything that's going on this table?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about free education. Aisha, when you see free primary education, as a parent, I will tell you, the government will provide tuition and other materials. But as a parent, I'll buy uniform for my child. That is now what our parents are doing all over the country.
So it is not free.
So the free education means the government will provide learning materials, textbooks, exercise books, maybe staff, pay for staff, watchmen, lab technicians. Those are the components that the government will provide. As a parent, I know I will buy food for my child. So when Uhuru said it, we know and we believe as parents that our children will have free secondary
So your
education.
expectation is that you will send your child to secondary school,
Yes.
and the only thing you'll give them is uniform.
Uniform and transport to school.
And everything else government provides.
Yes.
So, but with these promises, they're not tangible. They don't tell you how much will be allocated.
Yeah, we have the money here.
That's why we have the money.
Just a minute.
That's why we're having problems with
We
our
have a
primary
report.
schools.
Listen, just a minute. There was a report by Dr. Kileme Muria.
Yes,
I sat in that task force.
Yes.
Janet was a member.
And
I was also
the report was
chairman was also a member.
money for learning materials minus lunch, plus lunch, is 51 billion, 51.2 billion. And money for learning material minus lunch is 38.8 billion. And that is now what we are using for secondary education.
What we forget, the practicality of implementing.
And it is very practical.
Are you getting Janet?
It is very practical.
Let me paint this scenario.
Yes.
I visit more schools most likely more than you do. The challenges head teachers are facing. You have declared that there is free primary education. The same government tells schools that they can charge if they apply to the county education board. When they approach parents, this is what parents say: you declared free primary education. Why should we pay? And we know that one of the drivers of well-performing schools has got everything to do with resources. I like what the Jubilee government was very firm to say. We are going to pay for the cost of examination. They were very, very clear.
Yeah. Then they did.
And it's a fixed
It
cost.
is us who forced them to do it.
Whatever.
I wish the
I'm referring
it was the pressure from the unions that made us.
It's not correct.
Thank you very much.
It is not correct.
Thank you very much.
And I know that. It's not correct.
Okay,
This is the point I'm putting across.
They paid. They finally paid.
When the government is very specific that we are going to pay for the examination fee and says that for all children attending public schools, and later on says that for all the children, and it is done. Those are the details that we are talking about. What we need, what Chairman is saying here, is that let the two coalitions tell us that we are going to pay for the following: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But otherwise, cheating Kenyans that we will provide free secondary education to make head teachers keep on suffering to the extent of some of them being interdicted next year is completely, and the chairman is here. He will be the one bearing responsibility for hiring lawyers.
Thank you. And I want to then move the argument of Mayo forward. You see, when the government declared free primary school education, we from the union, like I've indicated, challenged them, hey you, why would you talk about free primary education without paying for the fees? Do you mean fees is not part of the education? And that's how finally they went in and paid, and I want to congratulate the Jubilee government. So I now come to Mayo.
Yes.
You know, why would you come to this studio and start defining what you imagine is the definition of free secondary education once NASA leadership has mentioned it, or Jubilee government? Take it like it is totally free.
That's why you see hold those thoughts, very many thoughts, hold them. Let's take a short commercial break. We'll be right back on the round table.